Camille Ashford was carrying a tray of fresh caramel butter brioche across the bakery floor when the banner outside the bakery caught the morning light and her whole body went cold. The line outside Honey Hearth Bakery stretched around the block. Television cameras, food bloggers with their phones raised, a local news reporter fixing her lipstick in a compact mirror before going live. This was the biggest day of Camille's life. Honey Hearth had just been named a finalist for the city's Best Artisan Bakery Award, and every single person on that sidewalk had come to see the woman who baked bread the way her grandmother had taught her, back when Camille was barely tall enough to reach the counter. Then the music inside the bakery cut off. Camille turned, tray still balanced in her hands, and saw her mother, Dolores Ashford, standing on a wooden chair in the middle of the shop floor. Dolores clinked a butter knife against a coffee mug until the room went silent. "Before the cameras come in," Dolores said, smiling the way she smiled at church when she wanted everybody to notice how gracious she was being, "I have an announcement to make." Camille felt her stomach drop before her mother even said another word. She did not know why, she just felt it, the way you feel a storm coming before the sky changes color. "Effective immediately," Dolores continued, "my son Marquise is the new owner of Honey Hearth Bakery." For a moment, Camille genuinely believed she had misheard her. She looked at her brother, Marquise, who was standing near the register in one of her chef coats, the sleeves rolled up because they were too long for him. He was smiling the way he smiled every time he thought he had won something without doing any work to earn it. "Mama," Camille said carefully, still holding the tray, "that is not funny." "It is not a joke, baby. Your grandmother left this building in trust. I am the trustee, and I have decided it is time a man takes the lead here." The employees stopped moving. Someone's spatula clattered against the mixing bowl, and nobody moved to pick it up. Camille set the tray down on the counter so slowly it looked like she was moving through water. Dolores produced a folder of papers from her purse, already signed, already notarized, and pressed them into Marquise's hands like she was handing him a diploma. Marquise signed the last line with a flourish, capped the pen, and walked toward Camille with the kind of confidence a person only has when they have never once paid a business's light bill. "You can go on and take a break, sis. I got it from here." Camille untied her apron with steady hands. She had expected, if this moment ever came in some nightmare version of her life, that she would scream, that she would throw the tray at somebody's head. Instead, she folded the apron in half, laid it gently on the counter beside the untouched brioche, looked at every single one of her employees, one at a time, and said the only thing that felt true. "Take care of the sourdough starter. It is older than I am." Then she walked out through the front door, past the television cameras, past the line of customers who had come to celebrate her, and did not look back once. Cut to black. 48 hours earlier, Camille Ashford still believed the greatest thing her grandmother had ever left her was a building on the corner of Larkspur and 9th. She was wrong, but it would take almost losing everything for her to understand exactly how wrong she was. 2 days before the ribbon-cutting disaster, Honey Hearth Bakery smelled of cinnamon and burnt sugar at 4 in the morning, which was when Camille always arrived. She unlocked the front door herself, flipped on the ovens, and started the sourdough while the rest of the city was asleep. She remembered every regular customer's order by heart. She remembered birthdays. She remembered which children liked their cookies extra crispy and which ones cried if the icing touched the sprinkles. When money was tight for a family in the neighborhood, more bread ended up in their bag than they had paid for, and nobody ever mentioned it out loud. Every single morning, an elderly man named Mr. Jenkins walked in at exactly 7 o'clock and ordered 1 cinnamon roll. Too soft, he would say, chewing anyway. The next morning, he complained the roll was too sweet. The morning after that, too expensive, though he never once skipped a day and never once stopped coming back for more. "You know you're smiling while you complain, right?" Camille asked him one morning, and the whole bakery burst out laughing, Mr. Jenkins included, though he pretended to be offended for the rest of the week. That evening, a black luxury SUV pulled up outside the bakery, which was unusual for that side of town. A tall, sharply dressed Korean man stepped out, straightened his jacket, and walked inside like he had been coming there for years, though nobody could remember seeing him before. He ordered 1 butter croissant and a black coffee, nothing else, and when Camille handed it to him, he thanked her with a warmth that did not match the stiffness of his suit. He did not say his name. Camille did not ask. He came back the next evening and the one after that. Camille remembered her grandmother telling her once, years before any of this, that a bakery's true test was not the customers who came for the food, but the ones who kept coming back even when nothing about their order ever changed. "That is not a customer," Grandma Odetta used to say, wiping flour off her hands onto her apron. "That is a witness." Camille had not understood what she meant until she found herself watching for the same black SUV every evening, hoping it would round the corner right on time. By the end of the second week, the staff had given him a nickname behind his back. "Mr. Croissant is here," one of the bakers whispered, and everybody peeked toward the window like teenagers. His real name was Tae-Min Kang, though nobody at Honey Hearth Bakery knew it yet. Nobody knew that he was the vice chairman of Haesung Foods, one of the largest premium food conglomerates in Korea, a company with factories on 3 continents and a board of directors who answered to him. Nobody knew that his driver waited outside every evening in that same black SUV, or that Tae-Min occasionally stepped outside to answer a phone call in rapid Korean, the words "board" and "chairman" slipping out just often enough that a sharper observer might have wondered who exactly this quiet, croissant-loving stranger really was. One evening, an employee noticed the same replacement mixer part they had ordered weeks earlier mysteriously appear on the back counter overnight, still in the factory box, with no invoice and no sender listed anywhere. Nobody connected it to the quiet man with the coffee order that never changed. Camille did not wonder. She simply liked him. He asked real questions about the bakery. He wanted to know why she proofed her dough exactly 90 minutes instead of 60. He wanted to know why she still used her grandmother's rolling pin instead of the newer one hanging unused on the wall. "Because my hands remember her hands," Camille told him one night after closing, when the shop was empty except for the 2 of them and the smell of vanilla still hanging in the air. "She taught me everything in this kitchen. She used to say that a bakery without love in it is just a warehouse for flour." Tae-Min smiled at that in a way that made Camille's chest feel warm and a little dangerous. "Would you ever leave this place?" he asked her. "Never," she said, without hesitation, and she meant it with her whole heart. She had no idea how soon that answer would be tested. One evening, Tae-Min tried to help her knead dough after closing, rolling up his sleeves like he actually knew what he was doing. Flour exploded across the counter, across his shirt, across half his face, and Camille laughed so hard she had to sit down on a flour sack to catch her breath. "I negotiate deals worth more money than this entire block," Tae-Min said, staring at his ruined shirt in genuine defeat. "And bread has defeated me completely." "Bread does not care about your title," Camille said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "Bread only respects patience." A few weeks later, Men showed up on a Sunday, the one day the bakery stayed closed, and knocked on the glass door holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Camille let him in, confused, since he had never come on a day off before. "I wanted to see the bakery empty," he said, looking around at the quiet shop, the chairs stacked on tables, the ovens cold for once. "You are always giving to everyone else in here. I wanted to just sit with you and give you nothing to do." They spent the whole afternoon sitting on overturned flour buckets near the back door, talking about nothing important. Camille told him about the first time her grandmother let her frost the cake alone, how she had used too much red dye and it looked like a crime scene, how Grandma Odetta had laughed until she cried instead of getting angry. Men told her, quietly, about growing up in Seoul with a father who ran a company but never once cooked a meal at home, and how the first time he ever felt truly relaxed in years was standing in her kitchen covered in flour. "You are different when you are here," Camille said. "I am myself when I am here," he corrected her gently. "Everywhere else I am a title." That afternoon was when Camille first understood that whatever this was between them, it had already grown roots too deep to pull up. Their relationship deepened slowly, the way real things tend to, built out of small, ordinary moments instead of grand gestures. Months later, on a quiet rooftop with the city lights spread out beneath them, Men got down on one knee and offered her a simple ring. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth, because he knew that flash was never what Camille cared about. "Marry me," he said simply, "not because I want to save you from anything, because I cannot imagine my mornings without your bread or your laugh." Camille said yes before he even finished the sentence. But they agreed, together, to keep it secret. Camille wanted one single achievement in her life that belonged entirely to her, untouched by anyone else's money or last name. And Men, watching the way her family treated her, said something that would matter far more than either of them realized at the time. "If your family finds out who I am before they find out who you truly are to me," he said quietly, "I will never know if they love you or if they only love what I can give them." Camille should have paid closer attention to how right he turned out to be. Because while Camille was falling in love in secret, her family was circling the bakery like it was an inheritance up for auction, and each of them had their own way of taking without asking. Dolores never once called Camille by her name. To her, she was always the bakery girl, as though the years Camille spent building the business into something the whole city recognized meant nothing next to the fact that she was simply the daughter who worked with her hands. Marquise referred to himself as a future entrepreneur, despite never once baked so much as a slice of toast in his adult life. He wandered in and out of the bakery whenever it suited him, offering opinions on things he did not understand, criticizing display cases he had never restocked, telling employees how business should be run, when Camille was the one paying their wages. "You should put the cakes closer to the door," Marquise announced one afternoon, watching Camille work instead of helping her. "The health inspector requires the cold case near the door for temperature reasons, Marquise. That is basic refrigeration." Aunt Rochelle came by regularly to borrow trays of pastries for church functions, always promising to pay later, a later that never arrived. One Sunday, she walked in 20 minutes before closing, filled an entire box with red velvet cupcakes, and breezed toward the door. "Put it on my tab, baby," Rochelle called over her shoulder. "Auntie, you do not have a tab. You have a debt." Rochelle laughed like it was the funniest thing she had heard the funniest week, and kept walking. Cousins wandered in on weekends, took whatever looked good behind the glass, and walked out without so much as reaching for their wallets, waving at Camille through the window as though she was supposed to be flattered they had stopped by at all.
At this point, one employee muttered under her breath one afternoon, watching yet another cousin leave with a full box of cookies, "We are running a charity that happens to sell croissants." Camille laughed it off in front of her staff, but late at night, doing the books alone after everyone else had gone home, the numbers told a story that was not funny at all. She had quietly covered nearly $4,000 in family loans over the past year alone, money that never once came back to her, money that came directly out of what should have been her own profit. Then, 2 weeks before the ribbon-cutting ceremony that would change everything, Dolores met privately with a lawyer downtown. Camille found out only because a family friend mentioned seeing her mother's car outside the office building, though nobody could say exactly what business Dolores had there. Camille asked her mother about it directly. "Just handling some paperwork for your grandmother's estate," Dolores said, waving her hand like it was nothing. "Do not worry about it." Camille believed her. That was her mistake. The betrayal, once it was fully explained, cut even deeper than the ribbon-cutting disaster had first suggested. Camille's grandmother, a woman everyone in the family called Grandma Odetta, had placed the bakery building into a trust years before her passing, naming Dolores as trustee until Camille turned 30. Camille's 30th birthday was only 11 days away. Dolores, apparently unwilling to watch full ownership pass to her daughter, quietly transferred the deed to Marquise instead, days before the trust would have legally handed everything to Camille. "This bakery needs a man's leadership to grow," Dolores said to a stunned family gathering after the news broke publicly, as though that single sentence explained away 30 years of Camille's labor. Camille built something lovely, but building and leading are two different things. Marquise, now legally in charge, wasted no time proving exactly how wrong his mother was. He replaced Camille's slow-proofed sourdough with frozen dough shipped in bulk. He swapped the fresh butter for a cheaper substitute nobody could pronounce. He installed a neon sign in the front window that clashed violently with the warm brick exterior Grandma Odetta had chosen decades earlier. He renamed Camille's signature caramel butter brioche Marquise's Master Loaf, slapping his own face on the packaging like he had invented the recipe himself. A little girl bit into one on opening week, chewed slowly, and looked up at her mother in visible confusion. "This bread tastes unemployed," she whispered, loud enough for 3 customers to overhear and repeat for weeks afterwards. Camille left Honey Hearth Bakery that day without a single tear, without a single raised voice, and the calm of it unsettled her family far more than screaming ever could have. She simply removed her apron, set Grandma Odetta's rolling pin gently on the counter like she was laying a flower on a grave, and looked her mother directly in the eyes. "One day," Camille said quietly, "you will understand the difference between owning a bakery and being a baker." Then she walked out, and the entire shop stood frozen in silence behind her. If Dolores expected the bakery to run itself under Marquise's leadership, reality corrected her within days. A regular customer named Miss Whitfield, who bought her grandson's birthday cake at Honey Hearth every single year for 9 years straight, walked in, looked at the neon sign, looked at the stale display case, and walked right back out without saying a word. She never came back. A food blogger who had once written an entire glowing article about Camille's brioche posted a single line online instead. "Whatever made this place special is gone. Save your money." The post was shared over 600 times by the end of the week. Employees who had worked alongside Camille for years began resigning one after another. One of the longtime bakers, a soft-spoken man named Otis, who had worked the ovens for 11 years, handed Marquise his apron on a Tuesday morning without ceremony. "I did not sign up to bake bread I wouldn't feed my own kids," he told him, and walked out the same door Camille had walked out of weeks earlier. Suppliers who once extended Honey Hearth generous credit terms started demanding payment up front, having lost confidence that Marquise understood how to run a business at all. The flour distributor called twice in 1 week asking for an overdue invoice. Marquise let both calls go to voicemail. "Give it time," Dolores kept insisting to anyone who would listen. "It's the customer's fault," Marquise complained, blaming everyone except the mirror. "They don't appreciate innovation." The final blow to their television dreams came when the news crew who had originally planned to film a glowing feature on the bakery's Art nomination quietly canceled their visit altogether. "We were not filming the bakery," the producer told Dolores flatly over the phone, loud enough that Marquise overheard every word. "We were filming Camille. There's no story here without her." Camille, meanwhile, was not sitting idle. A phone call from Grandma Odetta's longtime lawyer brought her back into an office she hadn't visited since the funeral. The lawyer, an older gentleman who had known her grandmother for nearly 30 years, slid a worn leather journal across the desk toward her.
"Your grandmother asked me to hold on to this," he explained, "and only give it to you if the day ever came that the bakery left your hands." Camille opened the journal with trembling fingers. Inside were decades of handwritten recipes in Grandma Odetta's careful cursive, flour stains still visible on some of the older pages. Tucked into the very back, folded neatly, was a letter addressed simply to "My Camille." "Buildings grow old," the letter read. "Walls crack, roofs need replacing, but recipes become family. I registered every one of these recipes, every trademark, every supplier agreement in your name years ago, long before anyone else in this family thought to ask what this bakery was truly worth. Your mother owns the walls. You have always owned the legacy inside them. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise, baby girl." Camille sat in that lawyer's office and cried for the first time since the ribbon-cutting disaster. Though this time, the tears came from something closer to relief than grief. Everything that had ever made Honey Hearth famous, every signature recipe, every registered trademark, every long-standing supplier relationship, legally belonged to her and had for years. Her family owned an empty building, slowly losing customers. She owned everything that had ever mattered. If viewers have made it this far, this is exactly the part of the story where things start turning around fast. So stick around, because the next scene is the one everybody has been waiting for. 3 weeks after Camille walked out, a line of black luxury vehicles pulled up outside the struggling, nearly empty Honey Hearth Bakery. Dolores, watching from the window, nearly dropped her coffee mug in excitement, certain that investors had finally arrived to save her son's failing business. She smoothed her blouse and rushed toward the door, already rehearsing a speech about her son's innovative vision. Tae Min Kang stepped out of the lead vehicle in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, several sharply dressed executives falling into step behind him, each one bowing slightly as he passed. Dolores extended her hand toward him with her brightest smile. "Welcome, welcome," Dolores said. "I am Dolores Ashford, the founder's daughter. I believe my son has been expecting your investment team." Tae Min walked directly past her without breaking stride. He crossed the nearly empty shop floor, past the cheap neon sign, past the stale display case, and stopped in front of Camille, who had come to collect a few of her grandmother's old kitchen tools that Marquise had carelessly left in a back closet. She turned around, tools still in her arms, and froze at the sight of him surrounded by a dozen bowing executives in a shop that had once been hers. Tae Min took her hand gently, lifted it, and pressed a soft kiss against her knuckles. "Fiancé," he said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I believe it is time we build your dream properly." The bakery went completely silent.
Dolores stood frozen by the door, coffee mug still in hand, mouth slightly open. Marquise emerged from the back room, took one look at the executives bowing to the man holding his sister's hand, and understood immediately that something enormous had just shifted beneath his feet. You know each other?" Dolores finally managed to say, her voice suddenly much smaller than it had been moments earlier. "We have been engaged for several months," Camille said calmly. "I chose not to tell any of you. I wanted to know whether this family valued me for who I am, not for who I might one day marry." "But you never said anything," Dolores stammered. "All this time you let us believe—" "I let you show me exactly who you are. That was never a secret. I just finally stopped looking away from it." Taemin turned toward Dolores, his expression polite but unmistakably firm. "Haesong Foods was never interested in purchasing this building. We have spent months quietly evaluating Camille personally for a leadership position within our new international artisanal bakery division. Her talent, not this address, was always the point. My assistant has been reviewing her recipes and her business records for nearly half a year, long before either of you ever heard my name." Dolores began stammering an apology, reaching for excuses about family and tradition, and doing what she believed was best. Marquise, to his credit, at least had the decency to look genuinely ashamed, mumbling something about how he never should have signed those papers in the first place. "I thought I was doing something big," Marquise said quietly, staring at the floor. "I did not think about what it would cost you." "It cost me nothing, Marquise," Camille said. "I already left before you took anything. You just did not notice." It was too late for apologies to undo what had already been done. But Camille, standing there in the ruins of the bakery her grandmother built, discovered she did not feel the need for revenge the way she once thought she might. She simply opened a folder she had brought with her and laid it on the counter. "Every recipe, copyright," she said. "Every trademark, every supplier contract, everything that ever made this place special legally belongs to me and has for years. You can keep the building, Mama, but nothing that made it famous is staying inside it." 1 year later, a new bakery opened on the other side of the city, its front window painted in warm gold letters that read, "Flour and Flame" by Camille Ashford. The grand opening line stretched around 2 full blocks, longer than Honey Hearth's had ever been on its very best day. Inside, a dedicated corner celebrated pastries blending Korean baking traditions with Southern American recipes passed down through Camille's family, a beautiful symbol of the life she and Taemin were now building together as husband and wife. Grandma Odetta's rolling pin hung mounted above the main oven, exactly where everyone could see it. Beneath it, a small brass plaque read a single line: "The best recipes are written with love, not ink." One of Camille's original employees, a young woman named Patrice, who had quietly saved several of Grandma Odetta's handwritten recipe cards from the trash during Marquise's disastrous renovation, was standing proudly behind the counter as the very first person Camille hired for the new shop, a small, quiet reward for the loyalty that never wavered even when everything around them was falling apart. Even Mr. Jenkins found his way to the new shop on opening day, ordering his usual cinnamon roll, taking his usual bite, and delivering his usual verdict. "Too soft," he said, already reaching for a second one. Across town, the old Honey Hearth building sat dark behind a dusty window, a faded for lease sign taped crookedly to the glass. Dolores stood outside it one evening, staring at the empty space that used to be filled with warmth, laughter, and the smell of fresh bread every single morning. "We still have the bakery," Dolores whispered, almost to herself, though it sounded more like a question than a statement. Marquise stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching a stranger's reflection pass by in the darkened glass instead of his own future. "No, Mama," he said quietly. "We only ever had the building. We lost the baker a long time ago." Dolores did not answer him. She simply stood there a while longer, watching her own reflection layered over the dark, empty shop behind the glass, until the streetlights buzzed on above her, and she finally turned and walked away. Back at Flour and Flame, the oven stayed warm long after closing that same evening. Camille stood in the doorway of her new kitchen, watching Patrice teach a nervous new hire how to shape a loaf the way Grandma Odetta had once taught her, hands guiding hands, patience passed down like a recipe of its own. Tai Min came up quietly behind her, resting his chin on the top of her head, still smelling faintly of the flour he had never quite learned to avoid. "Regretting anything?" he asked her. "Only that it took losing the building to understand what I actually built. It was none of it the walls. It was always the people willing to stand behind that counter with me." If this story moved you even a little, drop a comment down below telling me which twist hit you the hardest, because there is nothing that keeps a story like this alive, quite like hearing from the people watching it unfold. And if you want more stories exactly like this one, make sure you are subscribed, because there is always another one coming.